All right, hello and welcome to the CultCast, the best hour-long Apple conversation you're going to hear all week long. I'm your host, Leander Caney, and joining me today we have D. Griffin Jones coming in from Ohio.
Good evening.
Hello, Griffin. And Graham Bauer coming in from Barcelona. Hey, Graham.
Hola.
Wait, you never tell us where you're from, Leander.
Oh, I'm in San Francisco.
Okay.
Where I was going to show you the weather, actually. It's unbelievable. It's even worse than normal. You know what Mark Twain said about the summer in San Francisco, the coldest winter he ever spent? Mm-hmm. Well, you know, it's like, what is it? They call it the grey May, the June gloom, and then now we're in the no sky July. It's absolutely freezing. I had to put the heating on. Everywhere else in California, it's like blazing hot and sunny and beautiful. Here, it's even worse weather than England, which is just unbelievable.
Do you know the reason for that? Is it just because you're by the bay?
Yeah, it's the marine layer. It pulls in as the land heats up, over on Oakland where it's all nice and sunny. Yeah, it pulls the fog in over the bay. Actually, I shouldn't complain because it's even worse when it's sunny. I mean, it's absolutely unbearable when it's hot.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Well, the endless sun in Barcelona drives me mad. Today we had an overcast day, and it was like my best run in weeks.
Right, that's a relief from the
it's a relief,
absolute
for sure.
monotony of beautiful weather.
Yeah.
I mean, I bet the gray skies in July, they just remind you of home, Leander.
I know. Well, that's what I tried to get away from. I couldn't believe that I ended up in, like the even worse climate than the one I tried to escape from. All right, so this week we're going to talk about a really interesting rumor about the iPhone, the folding iPhone, which is coming in 2028. Is that right, Griffin?
2026.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, what am I thinking? Yeah, next year. So, this new room I think is really interesting. I think it makes it much more attractive to me anyway. Mm-hmm. There's also a big change coming in the iPad, which also sounds really interesting. We're going to be chatting about that, and we're going to look at iOS 26, the latest beta. Griffin's going to run us through all the new changes in that, and then Graham's going to give us some tips about running with your Apple Watch, how to get the most out of your Apple Watch when you're running. Oh, and then we've got a really good, funny question from a reader, which you want to stay tuned for. I thought it was pretty amusing. So this week, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Squarespace. This week's episode is brought to you by Squarespace. It's a really great web building tool. You can start a completely personalized website with a new guided design system called Squarespace Blueprint. You can choose from professionally curated layouts and styling options to build your own unique online presence from the ground up, tailored to your brand or business, and optimized for every device. So easily launch your website and get discovered with fast, integrated, optimized SEO tools and show up more often to more people and grow the way you want. That, we've been doing a lot of SEO work and it's absolutely essential. One of the nice things about the Squarespace website is the flexible payment system. You can make a checkout for your customers. It's pretty seamless. It's simple for them. There's a lot of options. It'll accept credit cards, PayPal, Apple Pay. And in eligible countries, you can offer the customers to buy now and pay later with Afterpay and ClearPay. And this is a really good way to sell content. If you have like an ebook or courses, you should be setting up, use Squarespace to set up a website to sell this stuff. And you can set up a paywall, or you can sell files, and customers can download PDFs, music, or ebooks. Go to squarespace.com, CultCast for 10% off. Your first purchase of a website or domain if you use the code CultCast at checkout. That's squarespace.com/CultCast, and then use the code CultCast at checkout. All right, thanks again, Squarespace, for sponsoring us. So let's go to our first story. This is about the folding iPhone. There's a new rumor that says that the folding iPhone might be a lot smaller than you might come to expect. This is like, this thing's pretty much a lock because there's so many rumors about the folding iPhone. I'm coming from all these different sources. It's like it's not in rumorland anymore. This is almost concrete. But the actual specs of what the device is going to look like has been in fluctuation. And in fact, there was a new rumor this week as well about iOS 27, which will be coming next week, which is that they've got their hands full with trying to optimize iOS 27 for the different screen sizes, and which obviously is going to be dynamic. When you open it up, the screen size is going to change. So this is a design challenge to design the operating system to accommodate that. And then of course you've got an external screen as well to deal with. So there's some interesting stuff going on behind the scenes in iOS 27. But the interesting thing I think about this one is that the TrendForce, which is a research firm, a market research firm, says that the external display is going to be 5.5 inches, which would put it make it the same size as the iPhone mini, more or less, which I think was 5.4 inches or 5.3 inches.
5.5 as well. Yeah.
Oh, 5.5. Okay, so yeah, it would be the size of the iPhone mini, which is like one of my favorite phones of all time. It was my favorite form factor. I love that thing. And then when you fold it out, it's going to be a 7.8 inch internal screen, which would make it the same size, more or less, as an iPad mini.
The original iPad mini. Yeah.
Okay, the original iPad mini. Yeah. What sizes are the new ones?
I don't know I think the new ones are like a little bit over 8 inches, but the original iPad mini was 7.9 inches, and this would be 7.8 inches. And 7.8 inches doesn't sound like that much bigger than a current iPhone, but you consider like the inner screen is probably going to have like that 4:3 much square aspect ratio, which makes the diagonal like much bigger. Like it'll actually be like a pretty big screen on the inside, as big of an iPad mini, if you remember that, which is small for an iPad, but big for a phone. And especially the fact that it's like it folds down to an iPhone mini size device.
Well, it doesn't necessarily fold down to an iPhone mini size device. It folds down to a device which has an iPhone mini size screen. I've got a feeling that, well, I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but my instinct is, based upon this, that it will have enormous bezels.
I mean, Apple's doing all this work, all this research on technology into how they can make the bezels smaller and smaller. I can't imagine that for a phone that's going to cost like 2 to 3 times as much as the regular phone, it's going to like look uglier with the big chunkier bezels, especially if this is supposed to be like a cutting edge, ultra low volume device. I mean, maybe I'm just being optimistic, but I think it's going to look pretty cool. And this rumor specifically maybe pushed me over the edge from like, I'm 75% sure I'm going to get the folding iPhone to I'm 95% sure I'm getting the folding iPhone, because
I'm with you there. I agree. I totally agree. And where'd you get this bezels from, Graham? You just if you look at the latest folding phones coming out of China, they are super thin. I believe they have edge-to-edge screens.
Yeah.
They're so thin. They're as thin as the USB-C jack.
I need to kind of figure out the dimensions of 5.5 inch screens and 7.8 inch screen. We need to kind of figure out what half of a 7.8 inch screen is. I imagine the bezels, when you open it up, will be very, very narrow and beautiful. But when it's folded, that small screen is really only just so that you can see notifications and stuff like that, I think. I don't think that they seriously expect you to do much like mobile computing with a 5.5 inch display these days. So I think that that's more... I mean, this is the other thing. When I read the story about iOS 27, it really got me thinking, because I've been focused a lot on iOS UI recently with the app that I'm developing. And I was thinking, well, how would this work? And I was thinking the closest thing to what we're talking about here is like spaces on the Mac. You can have multiple spaces. But one of the differences between Apple operating systems versus, say, Windows and Android is I think with both Windows and Android, you can have multiple instances of one app. Whereas with iOS and macOS, you can only have one instance, and then every other window is like a child thread of that one instance. And I think this presents some interesting challenges, because this is not a device where it's like a multi-screen device. Normally, when you think about that, say, if you have spaces on the Mac, you can see them all at once. Or if you have an external display, you can see them all at once. But here, one display is on the reverse of the device, so you can only look at one at a time. So then, like, which is the main device and which is the, like, external monitor, so to speak? And I don't think that it would be an acceptable user experience for it to be like that. Say, if the front screen, the 5.5 inch screen, is like the main screen, and then the internal one is like an external monitor, so to speak.
Maybe you should just think of it as one screen that changes size.
Well, I mean, you can do that, but if you've ever, like, I don't know, plug your MacBook into like a monitor which is like screen mirroring and it's different dimensions, and you unplug it again, all the windows go haywire, and it's not a nice experience. I think what Apple is going to want to do is you have apps on your 5.5 inch screen and you have apps on your 7.8 inch screen, and they stay there.
You don't think it's going to switch like so that when your main screen when it's closed is the 5.5-inch screen, and then when you open it up, it's going to switch. You don't think that's going to happen? You think there's going to be a dedicated external screen that will remain static, more or less?
I think so. I think they might do something like it's almost like a virtualized version of iOS on the inside, and that they can communicate with each other.
That makes it feel more complicated because then it makes you think of the separate screens as being separate spaces, and I don't think that doesn't sound like an Apple style to me. I bet it's going to be, the when you open it up from the outside screen and you unfold it, I bet you'll still see the same exact app you were running, but my guess is that it'll be in like a iPad windowing mode. So you have your app on your outside screen. It's tall and narrow and portrait, phone shaped. You open it up and then you see the same app, but on like the right half of the screen and on the left half of the screen, it's you see like your home screen again on the other half. And then the idea being that it's bringing up an app selection thing so that you can open up a second app side by side. Or maybe you open it up and it's the same app, but now just like iPad sized and you can resize it. I don't know which mode I think Apple would go with, but I think either of those seem pretty likely to me. Like the app that you're seeing on the outside is still there on the inside. It's just going to treat it as if, suddenly your display got a lot, like twice as big.
Yeah.
And now it's an iPad.
And which means then the display on the outside would have to be disabled when you open up the one on the inside.
Yeah, wouldn't it?
I guess, yeah. But it's like, at first I thought, this is really simple. And then as I started thinking about it some more, it's like, it's not simple. There's quite a lot of things they need to address. I do think that I agree with you that they'd want to have all the nice new windowing features of iPadOS on the inside. And I don't know how you preserve that while you're also interacting with the same apps on the outside. And that's going to be like a really chewy problem, I think.
I don't think you're going to be interacting with both sides simultaneously.
No.
I bet it's going to be like you only see one at a time. And then, so you open it up, you introduce a bunch of new apps and windows and things, and then you close it again. My guess is whatever the current application was, like the active window, when you had it open, is going to then take over the screen on the outside when you close it.
Yeah.
They would have to disable the outside screen, surely, because if you're holding it like a tablet, you could possibly hit.
You would have to, yeah. I mean,
the screen with your fingers on the back, and what Griffin's saying makes the kind of most intuitive sense, doesn't it? Because if you're messaging or playing a game or whatever, you don't want to be. If you open it up to get the bigger screen, you don't want to be thrown into a completely different environment. You want to be doing what you were already doing.
You want continuity, right? There, yeah. I think though I think you'll end up wanting contradictory things here. This is where I think Apple is making a challenge for themselves. In that, it's true. If you're typing a message on the outside and you think, oh God, this is too much hassle, I want to do it on the inside, then I agree, you need like a continuity type feature. But equally, I think if you had arranged your windows in a particular way on the inside, you want that to be preserved. But the things that you're doing on the outside are going to change that. And if you've got an application that's running on both, and on the outside it's running in like the size class compact mode, and on the inside it's running in regular mode, and so it's going to be jumping between the two, and some apps lose context, for example, when they do that. So that there are a lot of things to think about here. And I think some of those things they have started solving in iPadOS 26. Of course, iPadOS and iOS are actually the same OS with some slightly different things. So, an app can run on both very easily. That's not the problem. But I do think the UI is the problem. Exactly what's going to happen between these two screens. It's not the same as like two screens on one device. It's something which Apple's never solved before.
And that is, I imagine, why Apple is spending most of the next year adapting iOS 27 to the new phone.
And they're going to have to make some choices on our behalf. And some people, I think, won't like those choices, and some people will. And it's going to be really interesting to see where they land with some of those questions.
I bet there are project managers in Apple who had this exact same conversation we're having like a year and a half ago.
Yeah,
right.
I think so. I'm sure there are some clues in iPadOS 2027, like the way you can switch between the single app mode versus the multi-app mode. I think that's obviously some clue as to how you'll switch between the 5.5 and 7.8 inch display. But there's still lots of questions I have. And obviously, Apple will want to do this in some way that developers don't need to do anything, because otherwise, they might never get like app support.
But I think going back to the screen size rumor, this might be like the most exciting possible news I could have received about this, because I never had the iPhone 12 mini. I wanted the 3-camera system more than I wanted the mini size, but that did mean that every single time I saw or touched an iPhone 12 mini, it was like my heart was breaking every time all over again. But this is the best of both worlds. You have a small, possibly, an allegedly small phone that can become your big phone. Why would you ever need anything different?
Yeah.
I mean, unless you don't have $2,000, but...
And of course, it makes it smaller and lighter too, which I think is in line with Apple's design philosophy. I mean, I was really surprised because I don't know, for some reason I expected it to be bigger. I thought, they'll go for the biggest possible screen they could possibly get away with, and this is counterintuitive, so going smaller, but it's actually genius, I think. And of course, who's to say that maybe they will come out with larger versions later on. This is like, if you go back to the original, how big was the screen? It was like a 3-inch screen on the original phone.
3.5 inch.
3.5.
Yeah, so they're going back to their roots. I agree with Griffin. I have an iPhone 12 mini, and it's my favorite form factor. Like when the first big screen iPhones came out, I was so excited about that. I went out and got what is it, the 6 iPhone 6 Plus, and of course I bent it, sitting on it in my back jean pocket. It was actually curved. It still worked fine though. Actually, no, they swapped it out. They swapped out one, and the other one I was more careful with. But a couple of years later, I really lost. It lost its luster. I wasn't into the big screen phone anymore. It didn't really add that much to the experience, and it pulled my pants down. Actually, one time my pants literally fell to my ankles when I put my my phone in my back pocket. And I much prefer the smaller one, the smaller device. It's so much better. I don't know. There was kind of conflicting reports I've seen about that Apple killed it because it sold in such low numbers. It never achieved the volume they needed. But then I saw a more recent report. I saw some numbers just last week, I think, that said that actually no, it sold pretty respectably. So it's kind of a puzzle. If that's true, if it did sell in reasonable numbers, why did Apple kill it? It seems a shame.
It is curious because anecdotally, I hear so many people that love that smaller size. So yeah, it is curious that they killed it because I do believe there's a market for it. I mean, in the end, obviously, they didn't keep it up to date with the. I mean, that last mini, did it have Touch ID? I think it did.
No, it still had Face ID.
It had Face
the 13
ID,
mini
okay.
had the 13 mini solved a lot of the problems. It had more battery life.
Okay, yeah.
But I think Apple just thought, well, we'll probably make more money making like a the 14 Plus instead of the 14 mini, which is why they switched to. And arguably, like they didn't even have great success with that until the 16 Plus because they finally made a big phone in a color that people wanted, and that's all it took to start making to make this fourth iPhone a hit.
In that sense, it is strange if they scrapped the mini size because they wanted to simplify their product line. They didn't want to have so many different versions of iPhone. Then why on earth are they introducing a folding iPhone now? Especially if they see it as being quite niche and not something that will sell in big numbers. So they're complicating the product line there for a product that will have a niche appeal, and then a mini that they just scrap that. That seems like a strange choice.
And there's the iPhone Air too, which is also coming in. So
That's true.
There's more than how many handsets are there going to be this year?
There's going to be 4 in the fall, and they'll have the 17E in the spring, and then they'll introduce the Fold, so it'll be up to 6 models.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And still no mini.
I will say that the 16E, I think, replicates a lot of that mini feeling that I had, just because it's so light. Even though it's just as big, it's so much lighter. I loved my 2 weeks with the 16E.
I'm really tempted by the 16E too. I'm kind of like, the Pros are a waste on me. I just don't use the cameras to their full potential. And although it's kind of nice to know that you do have it there if you're ever going to use it. But then my terrible snaps. I just don't need that all that horsepower for what I'm doing, and I prefer that smaller form factor. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about the. There's actually a nice big change coming to the iPad, M5 iPad Pro, which is rumored to be coming out next year. Right, Graham?
The M5 iPad might tackle Face ID's biggest weakness. So what this is all about is, as part of the M4 iPad redesign, the company moved the Face ID and front camera setup to the long edge of the screen. This location was more naturally aligned with your eyes during FaceTime calls and Face ID in landscape orientation. And, I always use my iPad in landscape orientation with the keyboard. And so when the camera was on the left, it's not just that it didn't align with your eyes, but it's sort of like for everyone else, it was weird because they were like looking at the side of your face. So it didn't really work. What the rumor is that they're actually going to solve this with two cameras, one on the long side and one on the short side. And not just two cameras, but two Face ID sensors as well, because the other issue was, if you're holding the device with your hands on either side of it, then they obscure the camera. But if you've got two cameras and two Face ID sensors, then that's almost certainly never going to happen. So it sort of makes sense. It feels a bit like what is the expression, like a mallet to crack a nut or something. Do you really need to solve this with two cameras and two Face ID sensors? If it was an iPhone, it would be insane to have like two capsule cutouts on two sides, but actually on the iPad Pro, the camera is very discreet in the bezel. So if they're not going to reduce the size of the bezel, then I guess it's not going to harm it aesthetically to have two cameras and two Face ID sensors. It just feels like a lot of extra equipment for a sort of edge case problem. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think it's worth sticking an extra camera and sensor in there?
I think it's a good solution, but only for the iPad Pro. Because as we know, like they haven't brought Face ID to the iPad Air or the entry-level models because it's like the Face ID component is apparently just too expensive to put in those cheaper of a device. And it also doesn't make sense on the iPhone for the reasons you said. Also because nobody ever holds their iPhone in landscape ever. Yeah. But I think it makes sense for the iPad Pro and only the iPad Pro.
Well, I want to know is when are they going to add it to the MacBook? Face ID. That's what I would rather. That's what I'm more concerned about. Why? How come they haven't added Face ID to your MacBook?
I think the Face ID components are too thick for the thin display of a MacBook lid.
Yeah, that could be.
Unless you want to have a knob on the back of it, but
a chunky knob.
A camera bulge on the lid of your MacBook Pro would not be an elegant solution. Yeah, I think that may well be the reason. But it is one of those great mysteries, like why we still don't have cellular on MacBooks as well would be a really nice feature that we just never got.
I don't mind the idea of extra cameras on the iPad Pro. I mean, the camera on the iPad that makes no sense to me is the back-facing camera, the one that goes out. I mean, has anyone ever taken? Every now and again, you see somebody out in public, right, with a big taking a picture with an iPad. And they still look weird. You think, what are they doing? What are they up to? And I'm sure some people do use it, but I really never have. I don't think I've taken literally two or three pictures in my entire life with an iPad.
That's interesting.
Do you guys ever take pictures of the iPad?
Only if I'm taking a photo of my iPhone.
Right, you need something else.
That's the only situation where, if my iPhone's frozen up and I need to show what's on the screen to someone, then I might do that. But that's the only time I can recall ever using it. I was thinking about this in terms of because to me, this speaks to a great imponderable when you're designing iPad user interface, which is the main orientation of an iPad? Is an iPad mostly portrait or is an iPad mostly landscape? And Apple definitely in the early days saw the iPad as a portrait device, right? Even to the extent that the Apple logo was always oriented portrait regardless of how you were holding it. They've got a bit more sophisticated in that way. And I think when they introduced the smart keyboard, folio keyboards and so forth, they started to think of it more of as primarily a landscape device. But the one holdout, I guess, is the iPad Mini, because the iPad Mini still has the camera on the short edge. And when I see people using an iPad Mini, I do think that's a bit more like a ginormous phone, whereas an iPad Pro is more like a computer. And so I tend to think of it that Apple has been thinking about the bigger iPads as being mainly landscape devices and the smaller iPads as being mainly portrait devices. And I think that's about right. But this then, to me, what it shows is Apple is now starting to think actually the iPad Pro is both a portrait and a landscape device. And so, adding this second camera and Face ID sensor gives both orientations sort of equal status for the iPad Pro.
Equal standing, yeah. It kind of changed, didn't it? You know, the iPad. I thought I would have said, although you're totally right, that originally it was more of a landscape device. But no, you're right because of the placement of the Apple logo. Yeah, portrait device. I mean, now video formats are sort of changing. Like before, in the past, every time I took a video, I would always take it in landscape because I'd say, okay, you're going to watch on a TV or a computer screen. But that has definitely changed the last few years.
Yeah.
Like I think by far the more popular video format is by far portrait these days.
Mm-hmm.
You know, given all the apps and everything like that. So it's funny that they're switching it just when the world seems to be going in the other direction. At least with video, anyway.
But in this sense, with having the camera on the short side on the Pro, then it becomes a gigantic and very expensive way to look at TikTok videos, I guess.
Right, yeah. But you're right as well, though. I mean, people are putting. So many people are putting them into keyboards now. That seems to be that's the most essential accessory that seems to be these days for an iPad Pro, to turn it into a faux computer. And it would definitely be weird using it in portrait.
Yeah, I think the only time I ever really hold my iPad Pro in portrait mode is when I'm using the Apple Pencil to do drawings. Then I use it in portrait. But apart from that, I think I almost always have it clipped onto its smart keyboard.
Yeah. Well, when I'm reading on mine and using it for anything, it's almost always in landscape. Yeah, I don't think I use it in portrait ever. All right, let's move on to iOS 26, the new beta. And Griffin is going to run us through all the changes that we've seen. It's actually quite a significant new beta, right?
Oh, yeah. iOS 26 Beta 4, Apple has quite a number of changes. Most notably, they've gone back on liquid glass again. So
its death was greatly exaggerated.
Yeah. So you look at the bottom toolbar in an app like Music, and sure enough, they've
you can't see anything.
made the glass much more transparent again. Yeah.
It's exactly back to where it was, isn't it? Completely unintelligible.
In a media app like Music, Apple always says it's about emphasizing the content. Yeah. And it is so emphasized because you can no longer see the music you're playing, but you can see about 60 more points of pixels vertically in the content behind it. So I can't see what music I'm playing, but I can see, a little bit of the album artwork behind the video player, behind the music player at the bottom. That's interesting. It begs the question why they changed it in the first place and why they then changed it back. A theory that I heard is that because this is going to be the first public beta again, Apple used the first 3 betas to get the impression and, all the feedback from developers, people who tried it first. But because the public beta is going to be more open, they're like, okay, well, let's switch it back to how it was when we introduced it and see what the public thinks. Are we going to get the same reaction when we add, 5 times more people to the beta program?
That's an interesting theory. Yeah. That's.
Or it could be enough people complained on X, and so now they're just going to make it cool again.
Yeah, it's just internal battle. Like people are tugging it one way or the other, and I want it transparent and I want it frosted.
Yeah,
it's like
because I will say this does look much cooler than before. You watch especially in music and podcast, you can see the warping effect if you have really detailed album art, and it looks cool. You just can't read what it's saying.
Yeah. Well, there's the strange thing with what you have on screen there in the music app is it looks like they've disabled the edge blur effect. So when you scroll up, it's not blurring the content behind the status bar, which is a bit strange.
The edge blur is there when you scroll to the very top, but then as soon as you start scrolling, the edge blur disappears, and so you don't have that lighter background anymore.
But if you look at that, the clock becomes unreadable, the time becomes unreadable when you kind of start scrolling.
The edge blur is broken on the top half of the screen a lot. That happens in Safari all the time as well.
Oh, yeah.
So this is a rather buggy release. I said last week, wait out for beta 4. That'll probably be the public beta, and then you can probably go ahead. I take that back. Beta 4 is just as buggy, if not buggier than beta 3 in a number of ways. Although I will say battery life has marginally improved. A few other changes. Another area of illegibility is the lock screen, and they've tried to fix that by darkening the lock screen when you have a notification on screen. So you can see when I swipe away the notification, it gets a little brighter.
Yeah.
When I swipe down again, it gets darker again.
It
and
gets
that
darker, yeah.
helps a little bit. I don't think it adds enough contrast, and the animation is also kind of slow, but it does tell you that they heard the complaints and they're trying to fix it.
I think quite an elegant solution, quite a clever way to fix it.
I feel like it's
Yeah.
heading in the right direction, but even there, some of the words, particularly on the right-hand side, the contrast between the text and the background is still very low contrast. It doesn't pass muster in terms of accessibility. Even the time, if you look at the time, the number 9, which is sort of white on cream, and that again is like an accessibility nightmare. It's amazing that we're at this late stage, with only a month or so to go, and this is what we're looking at. I think they're really going to ship it, and it boggles my mind.
The iPhone event is 6 weeks away. Let that sink in.
Wow.
Following criticism for generating incorrect AI summaries, I think in iOS 18.3, Apple turned off notification summaries a while back, but now they've returned again. So when your iPhone or iPad restarts after installing the beta, it'll show you a prompt asking you whether you want to enable them again. I don't know what changes they made in the back end to make them more reliable this time, but they're bringing them back, apparently.
Well, apparently, if you Googled Ozzy Osbourne, when was it, yesterday or something like that, is Ozzy Osbourne dead? Google said, their AI overview said, no, he's alive and well. which
Yeah.
So there's a lot of thinking to be done about AI summaries.
Mm-hmm. They've tweaked the camera app in a number of ways. First of all, it has a slightly tweaked icon where the lens in the inside is a little bit bigger than before. They've also added a splash screen when you first launch it that explains the new design to you. But there is one change that really bothers me. You open the camera app, you can zoom in and out all before, and you have like the new mode picker at the bottom that's, collapsed, and you can pick, photo or video. And then when you hold your finger on it, you see like the full selection of modes. But the problem with this is that it doesn't scroll the right way, how you would think. Like you see the list of modes on the bottom, you swipe your finger one way, and then the mode picker scrolls the opposite way. Like you can see I'm moving my finger left, and all the items are scrolling right. I move my finger to the right, and all the items scroll left.
Yeah.
It's the only thing on iOS that scrolls the opposite way compared to everything else. I don't know why they've done this. It wasn't like this in the earlier betas.
I kind of get it, but I take your point, and it might be a mistake, but I kind of get where they're coming from with it.
Yeah, because doesn't it make it easier to see the target?
Well, they could keep the mode switcher the same as it is, but just have it scroll the way you would normally expect.
But it's like, which way do you expect though? Because I can the logic there is if I'm moving my finger to the left, and I know that there are choices which are hidden to the left, then I want to get to those choices on the left.
The fundamental thing about the iPhone is that whichever direction you swipe your finger in, the stuff on the screen below it moves in that direction, as if you're pushing the pixels with your fingers.
Yeah.
And
Right.
this inexplicably doesn't do that. And it's the only thing that doesn't do that.
You know what this is reminiscent of? This is exactly like in Mac OS X when the scroll bars went in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
It is
Do you
like
remember that?
Yeah.
And there was that was a huge controversy. I remember that being a massive outrage about that. But like you said, it's unintuitive. You pull down and the thing scrolls up, and or whatever. It was the other way around. Yeah, I haven't experienced it. I'd have to see. How unintuitive is it, Griffin? Does it totally throw you off?
I mean, if you know, like all the photo options are to this side, all the video options are to this side, I'm going to scroll to this side because those are where the photo options are, and I'm going to go there, then it throws you off. I mean, I imagine most people are probably going to read the labels anyway, but it's just jarring that it's the only thing on the phone that scrolls the opposite way. Because again, the phone is like a more direct interface. Like you're not moving a scroll bar, you're moving your finger on the thing that you're trying to move, and it's the only thing that scrolls opposite.
But you say it's nowhere else in iOS, and I think that's probably true at the moment, but it's like a segmented control which is collapsed, right? And they could make that now as a new component that you can use in other apps. Because I think the segmented control currently has to show all of the options, but what they've created
But segmented controls function the way that other things do, where like
they do, but this is a collapsed segmented control where you've got like space constrained And so I can kind of see the logic of it, because a segmented control works great on Mac or iPad, but on iPhone, when you're in extreme compact portrait mode, then a segmented control often doesn't have enough space. So they've created here a solution to that, and it could be something that they...
If I saw a very big segmented control that like went off the left and right side of the screen, and I went to scroll through the segmented control, I would still expect it to scroll the direction that my finger swipes it in.
Okay.
There are other, less controversial changes here. They've changed the icons of external drives and disks with a little lighter appearance and remove some of like the perspective from them. Another change that they've introduced is they've brought back the additional settings for call screening. So you can set it to never, so that you just receive every phone call that is dialed to you. You can ask the reason for calling, which is the new smart AI feature, or you can just have all incoming calls silenced again.
That's my kind of setting, yeah, right there.
Exactly, yeah. So that's what I have my phone set to. I think that disappeared for the first few betas, but now it's back, and they explain what each of these do in a much more intuitive way. So that's a good change that they've made. They've also changed the default wallpaper again. They've been introducing more features to it as they've gone along, but now it has a dynamic option. So it'll change colors throughout the day. And when you're editing your lock screen, it'll preview them all for you. Like it'll go through dusk at night where it turns bluer, and then black in the background, and then it lightens up again in the morning. And, you can preview them all there. It's pretty attractive. I like this wallpaper. I'm not a default wallpaper sort of person. Whenever I retire a device, I set its wallpaper to be the default for its operating system so that I can sort of jog my memory as to which device it is. But I think it's nice. What do you think?
I like it, yeah.
And the way it changes colors is really attractive.
Mm-hmm.
Though I have my dog on my lock screen, and you know that feature where Apple picks your best pet photos and cuts them out and like combines them with the time and stuff. And it works amazingly well. It just finds all the best photos of my dog, and there's always like a nice surprise every time I pick up my phone. It's another picture of Lilabelle.
I've switched to the Photos watch face on my Apple Watch for the first time, just to try it out because they made a number of changes there, and I'm enjoying it. It is harder to see the time because the time is now glass on the background, and it changes color and position every time I look at it, which isn't ideal for a watch, but I also don't use my watch a lot anyway. So there are a few regressions in Beta 4, but a few changes that are nice.
I hope they change the interface for the phone app. I think that is the worst thing ever. The phone app new interface is awful. I just find it absolutely an abomination.
They did make one small change that really bugged me before, and that now when you go to the search tab and type in a contact name, it'll show you like, the actual results of that contact and not your call history with that person, which was kind of confusing. But they made a number of changes to that. But you can't actually revert the phone app to the old design. You open the phone app, and then I think you tap the more button.
Oh, you're right.
In the upper right. You can go back to the old one.
Oh, cool.
But it's growing on me.
Yeah, I think maybe I should force myself to like it. Like a good Stockholm Syndrome sufferer.
Doesn't it speak to Apple's lack of confidence in the new UI that they actually gave you a switch to turn back to the old UI? Apple doesn't usually do that, so I think that there's, they kind of know there's a problem with it.
I guess there are some things that are pretty good. Like seeing the call history rather than just a list of your favorites is actually kind of useful, especially for all those calls you ignored.
Especially because most people don't have 50 favorites. You only have 3 or 4 favorites. I only have 3 or 4 people I ever call on the phone ever.
Well,
so
did you know
just having those on the top, and
it made me realize how much the world has changed, that I don't really care about the phone app anymore. I hardly ever use it. And the only time I do use it is when I get a spam call. And, apart from that, phone is pretty much dead to me. So it's I don't care what Apple does to the phone app. And having the phone app on the iPad, and I see the icon there, and it just gives me this feeling of depression. So I hid it because it's I just find the whole phone thing depressing now. It's just spam and junk calls, phishing.
Well, the one thing you never want to do is take calls on turn on that Wi-Fi calling on your iPhone or your MacBook. Oh my God, that's just the worst. Because then when your phone rings, all your devices ring, and you really can't get away from it.
Silence is definitely the best option.
It's also nice in the new phone app because you get spam calls, which are almost all the calls you ever get, it hides them. So they don't even clutter up your recents list anymore, which is great.
Yeah, that might make the phone usable again.
Yeah. But that's iOS 26 Beta 4. It's scarily close to being iOS 26, the released version for everybody.
It really is.
But
well, what's up the public beta? Because that was supposed to be released. Well, everyone was expecting it to be released this week on Tuesday.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, because
Or
Apple
Monday.
did say it was going to be released sometime in July. My theory now that it hasn't been released yet, I mean, maybe it's been released in the 30 minutes we've been doing this phone call, but real-time follow-up, the public beta is out right now.
Oh, it's out right now?
Yep, they just released the public beta.
Oh, okay.
Wow,
So
that was
there's
very
our
prescient
answer.
of you. You antanticipated that. You manifested that.
Oh, no. Can I unmanifest it?
There's plenty of other things I'd rather manifest than a public beta of iOS 26, I think.
Oh, that's going to be really interesting because I guess that a whole bunch more people are prepared to use a public beta than a developer beta. So a lot of people now are going to be seeing Liquid Glass for the first time, and I'm really interested to see what the reaction will be.
Well, the developer reaction was like, oh God, this is horrible, it's absolutely awful. And then the following week, it was, this is the best thing ever.
Yeah.
Followed by the week after that was back to it's awful. And then when Apple changed, tried to get rid of it, now that everyone missed it, they were like, oh God, we liked it, please bring it back. And so now they have brought it back. I mean, I wonder how the developers, they must be driven crazy inside Apple, like looking at Twitter. It's just so schizo.
Well, I feel both ways about it because I actually really want to like Liquid Glass. I love the lensing effect and I think it's really cool. But at the same time, there are these legibility issues. So I guess I want it, but I want them to somehow magically solve all the problems with it. And, some of the problems, are maybe subjective, but I do think some of the legibility problems we even saw on Griffin's demo are not subjective. They are just issues. And I really hope that Apple can find a way to give us the best of both worlds because I do really like it. I just feel it needs a little bit more TLC.
What about, like everyone's saying a slider to add more frosted glass? A simple setting, in the accessibility section of settings somewhere, where you can dial it up or down.
But they do have that, but I think it's a shame to have to do that because then again you're losing, and also I like to see the way that the designer intended for it to be, unless the way that the designer intended it to be was completely illegible. I think the accessibility features should be there for people that have accessibility needs. But I feel like it shouldn't be a situation where almost everyone has to turn it on because then it's not really an accessibility feature. It's it's just what you need to do in order to use the phone.
The one thing you never want to happen is for there to be like a bunch of viral TikToks that it's like, oh, you need to change this setting to fix your phone. Because that's what happened with like the Photos app. It was like, oh, no, don't update your phone to iOS 18. Don't update your phone. And because your Photos app will be ruined. And that information just spreads around instead of, oh, when you update to iOS 18, you can customize the Photos app to make it however you want. Like the worst thing you want is for, masses of people to be afraid of your phone rather than know how to fix it.
Yeah, I mean which is exactly what Apple will expose themselves to if they can't find a way to address those the most serious accessibility issues. I think it's okay for there to be the occasional problem, but there are just a few too many right now.
I was just looking for that setting you were talking about. Is there just literally one setting,
In
Graham?
accessibility settings, you can, under like visual, I think you can turn on reduce transparency.
Yeah.
And what that does is it turns all of the glass material into like the iOS 18 solid blurred material.
I just had it here, and it looked like there was a bunch of different ones. You could change like 4 or 5 different things.
You can reduce transparency does that, and then there's also increase contrast. And what that'll do is it'll like make the buttons brighter, and it'll give them like a big white outline around all of them. And
Right, and this is under
obvious.
display and text size, reduce transparency, increase contrast, and then a bunch of other different settings too.
yeah.
Wow, there's a lot of stuff in there. Actually, if you've ever go digging around in settings app, it's just absolutely mind-boggling, isn't it? You can go like menu after menu after menu with all these things that you can turn on. And I mean, in fact, Griffin, this has been a source of your employment for several years, hasn't it? Basically,
turn a whole 800-word article out of every setting, and you've got a job for 3 years.
Okay, all right. So let's move on. Graham, you're going to show us how to. This is our how-to section, and Graham, who's an avid runner, has got some great advice about how to optimize your running, which is. I think I might tune out for this section because there's nothing worse in the world than running. But with your Apple Watch, right?
That's right. Yeah. So what this is it's a feature that was introduced a few years ago with Apple Watch, and I think a lot of people are still not aware of it, so I thought it was worth talking about in this episode, which is running dynamics. And so these are metrics like cadence, vertical oscillation, ground contact time, and stride length. And I guess
this is the problem with my running. My gait is horrible.
Oh, is it?
So this would fix it? Is that?
Well, I mean, it's not so much that it will fix it. It will raise your awareness to what's going on so that you can be more mindful of those issues as you're running. So it is related to gait, absolutely right. So taking them in turn, the cadence is literally the number of steps you take per minute. And this is closely related to stride length, which is one of the other metrics. So if you imagine if you're taking longer strides, then you're probably doing less steps per minute. And if you're doing shorter ones, that's usually better in terms of injury. And so the way to think about this is, so if you're taking really long strides, you're often like landing on the heel of your foot rather than the ball of your foot. And what that does is it sends an impact right the way up your leg to your knee. And so runners that have, I've been running for 15 years now. I do about 7 miles a day. And I've really only twice in that time have I had knee issues. Generally speaking, I don't get any knee issues. And the reason is because I land on the ball of my foot rather than the heel of my foot. And that gives that extra level of suspension. But I guess I learned to do that because in the early days when I was running, I had a running coach that gave me feedback on my style. And so I would always recommend a running coach if you have the time, inclination, and money. You don't need to do it a lot, but doing a few weeks with a running coach can work wonders for your running style. But if you can't afford that, then the next best thing is to look at these running dynamics metrics on your iPhone that it gets. You'll find them in the fitness app on your iPhone, but it's your Apple Watch that's logging these when it's logging your run. And so the cadence will give you an indication of how risky your running style is. If you've got generally speaking, you want to kind of reduce your cadence, and 180 steps per minute is considered to be a sort of good target to aim for. So if you look at your cadence and you see that you actually are taking longer strides and you've got a slower cadence, you could be more mindful about that when you're running. Try taking shorter, more frequent steps and see if that helps, especially if you've had issues with like knee injuries or anything like that. This would give you a clue that might be the issue. Next one is vertical oscillation, and this is literally going up and down as you run. And most running coaches will tell you it's more efficient to bounce less as you run. So if you imagine like when you're running, if you had like a glass of water that you were balancing on your head as you ran, then that style of running is more efficient, especially for endurance running. If you were doing like 100-meter sprint, then basically you sacrifice a little bit of efficiency for that burst of energy. So if you look at sprinters, they will oscillate a bit more than marathon runners at the elite level. So it's not always right that you have to reduce the oscillation, but again, it's something good to be mindful of. And so if you're kind of raising your awareness to how you're running and how it feels, and think about, am I wasting energy going up and down when I should be putting that energy into moving forwards? And if you think that you are, then you can use the vertical oscillation metric to give you feedback on that. And the last one is ground contact time. So this is exactly what it sounds like. It's how long is your foot in contact with the ground each time you push off. So if you imagine as you're going along, your foot touches the ground, it pushes off again. And when you're running, it's actually a very short space of time that your foot is on the ground. And elite athletes are usually under 200 milliseconds. And most experienced runners, just people like myself, you'd normally expect to be under 300 milliseconds. Again, I would say don't lean in too much for benchmarking yourself with other people, because we're all unique individuals with unique bodies. So that what's more important is to actually look at your metrics and how they change relative to yourself over time. I wouldn't get too bogged down on comparing it to someone else. Where you find these 4 metrics, if you go into the fitness app on your iPhone when you've logged runs with your Apple Watch, and annoyingly the fitness app takes a while to load your workouts, because your workouts are actually encrypted in HealthKit, so it's actually taking that time to unencrypt your workouts in the HealthKit API. Eventually your workouts will appear there if you're very patient. Then if you go into the workout and then you tap the extra details, you'll get a map of your run. And if you scroll down below that, you'll then see charts for these 4 metrics. And one of the really cool things that you can do is there's another segmented control, sadly not one that you can scroll from left to right on, but there's a segmented control where you can just look at this chart in 15-minute segments, and then you can scroll the chart from left to right, and it will highlight on the map which segment of your run you're looking at. So you can zoom in and get a lot of detail of, like, when I'm going up a hill, how does that change my vertical oscillation? When I'm doing stairs, what is the impact of that? And so Apple has done a really great job of this, and it's a little bit hidden. But if you go in there, it's like everything you could get from a top-end Garmin watch is right there with your Apple Watch as well in the fitness app. And so it's well worth diving in and taking a look and see what it tells you about how you could potentially optimize your running style to reduce your risk of injury and increase your performance.
Have you used these metrics yourself, Graham, to tune your own running?
I do. I think I've now been running so long that this is probably totally wrong, but I think I've got good awareness of it now. As I said, in the early days when I was learning to run, then I had lots of feedback from my running coach. But now I think I have quite a good knowledge of what I'm doing. So I think, to me, what these metrics help with is to raise your own awareness to what you're doing. And I think you will actually get to a point where with this kind of feedback, you can actually start to feel it as you're running. So you know what you're doing. I guess that where it's useful, and in preparing for this, I took a look at it again and looked at my stats, is, to just dip in from time to time to just make sure that things aren't drifting. It's kind of like as you start getting a bit lazy and bad habits start to reemerge, then you could go into here and just see if there are any trends that you don't like that you would like to address. But I think, this to me, like having awareness of your running dynamics is a way to improve the mindfulness of your running. Last thing I suppose I would say on it is I think these stats are pretty good that you get from Apple Watch. Not all Apple Watch stats are good. I think heart rate I wouldn't necessarily trust. But I think these are pretty good because it's about the accelerator just banging around on your wrist. But the one caution I would say is the wrist is not really the right place to have the accelerometer. Most of these are supposed to be measured from your core. So Apple is actually having to remove a lot of the motion noise from your wrist in order to infer what's going on in your core and even like your foot, right? Because it's actually working out how long your foot is on the ground based upon your wrist, which you're waggling around independently. So
that seems crazy, yeah. How they can factor that, how they can tease that data out.
I think they use machine learning models, the whole what do they call it, ML kit or whatever it is. And
of course, it's not going to do any good to strap the watch to your chest or anything like that, is it?
You could try that, but that's obviously it's not designed to be there. So that's not going to, that might actually be worse. What I would say is they are. My experience is these are quite good stats. They're not perfect, but they're quite good. Better than some of the other stats you get out of Apple Watch, but they're not perfect as well. So if you see something and you're like, I'm not sure that's right, be aware that it might not be right. You don't want to kind of think, I'm now going to do this crazy running style to try and adjust this, and then you actually make your knee worse. So if something if something doesn't seem to be right about the stats that you're seeing, maybe it's not. And so you do need to take care there. But generally speaking, I found these to be quite good.
Okay, they don't have one for walking, do they, or anything like that? Can you apply it to walking, fast walking?
Yes, there are. It's a little bit different, but you do have some similar metrics for walking, and I think they're in the health app. I'll double check that.
All right, yeah, I tried running. Yeah, I was such a the kids. It brought back all my high school trauma when I got bullied. You know, I used to because I ran with such a ridiculous style. You know, my arms flailing everywhere and bouncing up and down. That the other kids used to make fun of me. So. It put me off running forever, but I did try. We had a treadmill in our basement for a while, and for about a year, I think I tried running on the treadmill and at the gym, and I trained myself to land on the ball of my feet because that was the other that was my big problem, was landing on my heels, and it would jar all the way up to my skull. And I trained myself to land on the balls of my feet, and then I really started to enjoy it actually. Like I couldn't, because you get that high, the endorphin high. So I really started to look forward to it. I could do 40 minutes or so and run a 5K. I think I was doing it in about 35 minutes or something like that, which was okay, I guess. But yeah, it was really enjoyable. I did really enjoy running. I should go back to it, but only on a treadmill. I can't stand running outside.
I love running outside because I love just seeing the world go by, you know. But I get into this state where, to me, it's like totally a meditation, but also ideas pop into my head. Especially as I'm working on the new app that I'm developing at the moment, and there's like some chewy user interface problem I'm trying to figure out. And I would just find at the end of my run, it's like the answer just popped into my head, you know, and it's just giving your brain that space to just like relax. And, you know, so that's why I love it. But running's not for everyone. I totally buy that. Running's not for everyone. If you hate it, then you're a cyclist, right? You know.
Yeah. But it's the hard exercise, I think. You know, like getting any kind of like really hard exercise where you get your heart rate up to the maximum, and it's a total reset. If you're feeling gloomy or depressed, if it's the last thing you want to do. You don't want to exercise, but if you do, it resets you. It's amazing. I think
100% agree. Yeah.
Amazing technology.
I think, you know, when I started running, I honestly think I got smarter. I really think it made me more intelligent. I think it just really is. It gets the circulation going in your body for hours afterwards, and you know, so your brain is. I believe your brain gets more oxygen if you exercise regularly, and you get smarter. I totally believe that.
Well, Steve Jobs is a big advocate of this, wasn't he? Like every time he wanted to solve a problem or talk to somebody, he'd go for a walk. Walking, I think, also, you know, like great for thinking.
Yeah, the great thing about walking is if you're able to walk. Not everyone can, obviously, but if you're able to walk, it's a kind of a universal thing that, you know, even if you have health issues, for a lot of people, walking is an exercise that's very, very safe and really, really so good for you.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I went for about a year ago. Went for a walk with my 84-year-old mom, and I'd been cycling, like, you know, 100-mile weekends and cycling 6 days a week, doing almost 2 hours a day cycling. So I was cycling a lot, putting in a lot of miles, and pretty fairly fit from a cardiovascular perspective. But I went for this walk with my mom. We just took our dogs up to the local park, and then did I tell the story already? I think I did, and I bored everyone with this a couple of weeks ago. But I could barely move. I was so stiff and sore. I actually had a nap on the couch, and of course she's totally fine because she walks everywhere. But I was really shocked that a few years of not walking regularly, you know, had reduced my body to the state where I could almost not walk at all. So now I'm consciously trying to walk a couple of miles every day, and you know I've had a bit of a mixed success with that, but I'm definitely able to walk, and that took about 3 months too of pain and stiffness that took about 3-4 months to get over. So I'm a lot better now, but I was really shocked actually. Yeah, if you don't walk for a little while, how quickly you can lose that capability.
It sounds to me like you're describing a completely alien experience, because I don't know. I don't do drugs and I don't run. And if running is what a runner's high feels like, and that's what feeling high is like, I don't understand why people do either of those things. It just makes me feel the same as I was before, except out of breath and more tired. But
right. That's too bad. Well, you should definitely do. You got to get that runner's high. It's a wonderful, wonderful feeling of euphoria, and it's the most life affirming thing you can you can feel.
And the other one, of course, is weights. And say if I'm frustrated, if someone's annoyed me or something like that, then pushing out a few reps with weights is a cathartic thing. I can channel my rage into it. So I think if you're not a cardio person, then strength training is often the answer. And that is another form of therapy for me. If I'm in that
For sure,
frustrated state, then I need to lift things.
I was doing weightlifting for a while too, but I need to pick that up again. I really enjoyed weightlifting. Really enjoyed it. Loved how it made you feel. All right, let's move on to our next section now, which is a question from one of our listeners, and I thought this was kind of amusing. The question comes from Brent Smithline, and it refers to last week's discussion about the iPhone colors, where we waffled on for hours about the colors coming to the iPhone. And so Brent, was a little bit puzzled about this. He says, the first question I always want to ask pundits when they go crazy about the color of an Apple iPhone is, how many people do you see in normal places when you're out and about with a smartphone that does not have a case on it? I'm a total loss why you go crazy over something like this, says Brent. I would understand if you were talking about the color of the case that's going on the iPhone or the case features, but not the color of the phone itself. So he says, one year when I was trading in my Apple iPhone to pick up the latest and greatest version, I was totally surprised by the color of my existing Apple iPhone when I took it out of the case to trade it in. It was not a color I would have chosen. Well, I don't know how that works, but anyway. However, it must have been the only one they had in stock in the configuration I wanted when I purchased at the store. Okay, there's your explanation. So since it always goes in a case, as soon as it comes out of the box, color makes no difference to me. And I think, I got to agree with Brent here. I think he has some good points.
He does have a good point.
In fact, I'd be hard pressed to tell you the color of my iPhone.
I never use a case. I never have used a case on my iPods or my iPhones. The only thing that came close to a case was on my iPods. I used to use the iPod sock. I loved that. The thing,
What?
The thing with the iPod sock was when you took the iPod out, you could hold your iPod, and it was a beautiful thing. And like, if you put it in a case, then you can't see your iPod anymore. But the iPod sock protected it, but also, you got to interact with your iPod. And I just think iPhones are such a beautiful thing. It's a moral pity to put them into some fugly case. And so the funny thing from my perspective is I'm perfectly happy with the colors that Apple provides, but I never put it in a case. But I do think it's a really interesting point. There's so much energy expended on colors when, I think I'm fully aware that I'm in the minority. Most people immediately stick their iPhone into a case.
Apple is trying to serve a bunch of different audiences. And I think that the tech press gets excited about new colors because we are the type of people to not put our phones in a case. We're the enthusiasts. We want to experience the phone as it is. We're the people who have the most respect of Apple's design studio. And so I want to experience, the Apple phone as it was designed. Most people don't care about it. They're like, it's my phone. I don't want it to break. So they're going to put it in a case. And they just think about it, in the utility way that it sounds like our listener Brent feels about it. But Apple has to serve all these audiences. So, they have to serve the people who don't really care about the color, and they make the black and silver ones for those people. But it's frustrating for us because we're the type of people who get excited about a phone because it's blue.
Yeah.
I want the blue one, I want the red one, I want the green one.
I do think that there's a historical dimension to this, because obviously part of Apple's turnaround was the iMac, and when the iMac first came out in Bondi Blue, that color was really important. And then when the next one came out with 5 colors, and it was revolutionary for the industry back then, because no one really thought about computers as being consumer devices, consumer products that you'd want in different colors. And so Apple had connected 2 different industries there. Like, we're actually in a consumer industry, and we're making consumer electronics. So for the first time, computers have become consumer electronics by Apple making iMac in different colors. And I think my theory with I'm an old geezer myself, right? So I understand Lewis as an old geezer as well. And I think what Lewis is, in his mind, what he's thinking about when he wants really bright colors is he's remembering Apple's glory days when bright colors is what turned the company around. So it's not really like brightly colored iPhones is going to mean much to him, because as Brent says, he will put it in a case and he's not going to see it again. But somehow that choice of colors, and especially having 5 bright colors, is such an iconically Apple thing. And I think color is a big part of the Apple brand as well. If you look at ever since iOS 7, it's just been so incredibly colorful, the UI of iOS. If you look in the App Store or in Apple Music, it's just a riot of color. And, the original Apple logo had 6 colors through it. And I think color is an integral part of Apple's brand. And so I think that and color is such an emotional thing as well, right? So I think even though color objectively doesn't matter because you're just not going to see it, as Brent said, he forgot what the color of his phone was. I think the reason why people care about it so much is because of those other associations that it has that harks back to the emotional connection they have with Apple as a brand.
I think you imprint on the Apple style of when you start paying attention to Apple, like, people my age who have nostalgia for like the iMac G3 because I was in like, school computer labs, like, oh man, like you see a row of all the colors and you're like, ooh, I want it. And, the people in the class are like fighting over which color they want, even though they're all the same computer. But, and then, I personally started getting Macs in like the middle of like the Intel era. So like to me, the Intel era color scheme of black and bright silver is like the quintessential Apple color in my mind. And so it bugs me that they don't make a black phone that has the silver band around it like the iPhone 4 anymore. But you imprint on the philosophy of when you join Apple, and then you're sad when their design taste evolves. I'm sure there are a lot of people who joined around like the G5, like late PowerPC era, who think, oh yeah, bright white plastic, that is the Apple color in my mind.
Yeah, right, yeah. Well, Steve Jobs hated the color of the first iMac, the Bondi blue. He thought it was too muted, and that's why they came out with the 5 bright pop colors afterwards. And I interviewed Doug Satska, who was one of the members of the Industrial Design Studio at the time, and he said that Jobs said, this is he said the iMac is great, but we chose the wrong color, and they did sort of a show and tell. They brought in all these different colored pieces of plastic and glass into the design studio and lined them up around these display tables around the edge. So there were things like the rear lights from a car, the module with the brake lights and the reverse lights. It comes in often, translucent red. That was one, and then they had colored bottles and stuff like that. Different kinds of pop bottles, and that's how they chose all these. Jobs went for all these bright colors. And of course, his design decisions prevailed there. But then they went to things like Dalmatian, didn't they?
And Flower Power.
Yeah.
Flower Power, yeah. Which I don't know how those sold. I know that the reaction to them was pretty favorable, but you don't see them, do you? They definitely didn't have that pop impact that the original one did.
Yeah, that's true. And I haven't seen one of those in years, like in decades since I've seen one of those.
Yeah.
I fully expect to see one behind Griffin in a future episode of this podcast. I expect we'll see Griffin with a Dalmatian iMac behind him.
I wish. I do like the Dalmatian and the Flower Power. I feel like those have aged a little less poorly. People have nostalgia for the bright, colorful ones, and the Dalmatian and Flower Power ones are like, oh yeah, those are the weird ones they made at the end. I don't think they've aged terribly well, but it was impressive that they were able to, like, Steve Jobs was excited about it because they had to like invent a new method of like plastic injection molding to like get those colors and patterns inside the plastic without dyeing them.
They went to some candy factory here in California. I think up in Fairfield they have a jelly bean maker, and they wanted to see how are they able to keep the colors consistent with the when they're making the jelly beans. Okay, right. I think that's all we have time for this week. Let's wrap that up right there. So we'd like to thank everybody for joining us, and if you want to continue the fun, please follow Graham Bauer, who's the host of the Apple Core podcast, which you can find wherever you get your podcast from. And Griffin is on Mastodon and Blue Sky at dgriffinjones. And if you want to subscribe to our newsletter, the Cult of Mac Today newsletter, which I write the introduction for every day, go to newsletters.cultofmac.com. So please send us a text using the link at the top of the show notes, or in the YouTube comments. That's a good place for us to see what you have to say. That's where we got Brent's comment from. So this has been the CultCast, the best hour-long conversation you're going to hear all week long. New episodes of the CultCast come out every Thursday night. And I'd like to thank you for everybody for listening, for watching, and we'll see you next time. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Yeah. Sorry for f***ing that up.
Oh, you're good. It'll all come out in the edit.
Maybe one year. 1 week I'll get better. Yeah, that was fantastic, Griffin. That fucking iOS 26 beta walkthrough.
Oh, thank
That
you.
was fucking great. I thought that was fucking great.
Okay.
That was exactly the kind of thing I think that these how-to sections could be. Although there is that, like Graham said, I was conscious the whole time about the whole visual thing. Like, are we going to be alienating our listeners? People are just tuning in for the listen.
I think it was okay. I was thinking about that, and I think it was okay.
Yeah.
I think so, because we were describing what was going on.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think it worked out fine. But yeah, I was really impressed with that. That worked fucking great.